Welcome to the last session of the day, everyone. I'm excited. So what I've done is I've kind of gone over a number of categories that are things that people are always looking for in, like, what's the best plugin for this, and and I have some suggestions. I have things that are like most commonly used in higher ed. Now that I'm a freelancer, I was at Texas A&M University in-house for about 10 years. Now that I'm freelancing, I still do a bunch of contracts with them, but I also get to work with a lot of other universities. And I've also been involved in the WPCampus community since it got started, and going back a lot further to High Ed Web since about 2004. So I have a lot of experience in what people are using in the WordPress community and what's popular on campuses. But I definitely want to hear what y'all are using if we hit a category where you found something that is really cool and it's not something that I've mentioned. So throw your hand up, shout them out, and I'll repeat them for the live stream. Before I talk about what plugins people are using, I want to talk about how you evaluate a plugin. This is my basic list. Is it maintained currently and supported? If not, can we maintain it and support it in whatever team I'm working with? Should we rewrite it? Is it a good idea, but the code quality is terrible? Maybe we should create our own, especially if it's something small and simple. Is it written with hooks, which is, if you're not a developer, is how WordPress accomplishes various tasks. And if a good plugin will give you ways to add your own logic into whatever progression of steps it is doing. A poorly written plugin might not do that. The plugin might be so simple that it really doesn't need a hook. It's just using the hooks that exist in WordPress. But if it's a complicated thing, I'm going to want to be able to hook into it with my own logic and maybe modify and customize what it's doing. And then we worry about the licensing. Obviously, we look for things that are GPL, maybe MIT licensed. We're totally, great with premium plugins if the premium actually gets us some support. And it depends on the project. As I move from university to university, it depends on the budget and, how are we going to apportion that. Jeremy Felt had a great list of the criteria that he uses for evaluating enterprise level plugins in his talk about 90 minutes ago. And it's up on the Twitter. If you go through the WPCampus hashtag and go back a little bit, he has a slightly different list for evaluating plugins that are going to be used at scale. And I thought that was great. Anytime other than this session, you want to ask, hey, what's good in such and such plugin category? There is a plugins channel on the WPCampus Slack. And there's been a lot of really great suggestions just in the past couple of weeks. Some of them made it into this presentation. So you can always go there and say, hey, what are people using? What's the best for this? And this is kind of my basic set of things that I use on almost every site, no matter what we're doing. Advanced Custom Fields is super popular, and it's one of the best user interfaces for adding custom fields to your WordPress posts. It does a lot of other things too. It actually has a front-end editing form feature that not a lot of people use, I think, in higher ed, but it's pretty cool. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other things that I do with Advanced Custom Fields a little bit later. But for basic custom field editing, it's kind of the best. And I think people are a little upset right now because Gutenberg is coming along and is changing the way that we edit posts. And Advanced Custom Fields is kind of trying to keep up with that. And Gutenberg's changing really fast. And so they're not perfectly in sync right now if you're keeping up with the beta releases of Gutenberg. It's going to be fine. Everybody needs to take a deep breath. Gravity Forms, I think, is probably the most popular form builder for WordPress in higher ed. Some of us may be slightly frustrated with it. It's probably the oldest and most well-established of the big commercial form plugin options, but it's not the most accessible. We have to have a second plugin, WCAG Fields, for Gravity Forms to make it do its labels and inputs in a sort of sensible order. Otherwise, it skips around. The screen readers read one label and then a different field and then another label and a different field, and it doesn't work in the order that it should. So this plugin fixes that, mostly. We'll talk about some other form options in a little bit. Safe Redirect Manager is a redirect and or vanity URL shortener that you can use. It's written by the 10up agency, which is a very reputable, established group. That plugin is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's pretty great. And it distinguishes itself from the other plugins by having that word safe. There's a function in WordPress called Safe Redirect. And it strips out query strings that may not be quite so healthy. It does some other things to make sure that when you're doing your redirects, you're not introducing any vulnerabilities. Simple page ordering is another one from 10up, and it's just a drag and drop page order plugin. It works with all hierarchical post types. So if you have custom post types that are also parent-child, you can use this without any additional code for that. WP Help is a little bit older, but still great. And it is a way to have documentation in the WordPress dashboard. I use it a lot just for whatever custom little thing that I've done for the client that's not pure WordPress. That helps me kind of keep track of that. And WP Pusher is the latest and greatest for using the WordPress plugin updater to keep up with plugins that are hosted on GitHub. Or I think it also works with that other system that I can't remember off the top of my head.
Subversion.
I'm sorry?
Another, what kind of system?
Another version control.
Oh, like Subversion or?
No, not Subversion.
GitLab or?
It works with GitLab. It works with GitHub and Bitbucket. Thank you. Bitbucket is the other one that it works with. There is one that people were using for a while called GitHub Updater. It was a little flaky and had some update issues, and we ended up moving to this one, and it's been super smooth. My only issue with WP Pusher is last time I checked, it did not work with, if your campus has a hosted GitHub instance, which Texas A&M University does, it'll work with that as long as the repos are public on that. It'll work with private repos on github.com. It will not work with private repos on the private instance. Does that make sense? So it's got that one little limitation. There's some specialty plugins that I use when the occasion calls for it. Download Monitor is one that is just a download counter and manager for your files. So if you're making some kind of like zip package public and you want to track who's getting that, Download Monitor is pretty good. Document Revisions has been mentioned a few times. It's a great plugin that lets you, it creates a post with an unchanging URL for a file that you upload through this. So rather than using your media library, if you had some sort of PDF that is like your institution's policies or something of that nature where you're going to be updating it frequently and sharing that URL, you can use Document Revisions to upload new copies without having to give a new URL for each version of that file. Menu social icons is just one that you drop in, and if you have a link to Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, whatever in your navigation, it replaces it with an icon. It's the simplest thing in the world, and it's beautiful. It works seamlessly. When I work with engineering and science and math faculty, they always want LaTeX, and there is a plugin for that. It's called WP LaTeX. Imagine that. Works great. And Visualizer is one that I've recently kind of added to the lineup. It probably wouldn't meet Jeremy's qualifications, let's put it that way. It's a little, it's not slender, it's not elegant, and it pushes its updates. It's like premium features a little bit, but it is a really nice, simple plugin for creating or to display charts and graphs out of Google Charts. Anybody here actually like JETPACK? One person? I hate JETPACK. I think most serious WordPress developers are not fond of Jetpack because it makes all of our site administrators have a WordPress.com account. And it's very hard to explain to faculty, like this, you have to have this account in addition to the one that we've given you. And by the way, Jetpack is going to disconnect itself every few weeks and you're going to have to log back into WordPress.com. And that's not your CAS login, your NetID, that's your WordPress.com account, and they're completely separate. And for all of these reasons, we hate using Jetpack on sites that are faculty facing. And so there's a developer mode that will, in theory, let you use Jetpack without having to talk to WordPress.com, but it doesn't work very well in my experience. So there's a bunch of Jetpack substitutes that are available on WordPress.org, and they're all prefixed with JP. And so you take the individual features that you want out of Jetpack and look for the substitute plugin, and it's usually there. So my favorites that I use all the time are widget visibility, the image carousel, and the custom CSS. So those are kind of the usual suspects. And launching straight into the specific categories of things, I want to start with images and media. Enable media replace. If you're not using document revisions, but you do want to occasionally just replace a file and not have to update all of the embedded links to it within your content. If you just have a new version of an image that's maybe already been included in 16 posts and you don't want to have to go replace all of those, you can just install this plugin and it will let you replace that file in place without creating a new URL for it. My eyes are up here. I love the name of this one. And all of the feminine presenting people in the audience will probably understand exactly why it's named this. It's because as soon as you start uploading pictures of people to WordPress, it crops in the middle. And that usually means that you get from about mid-torso to about mid-nose. And what my eyes are up here does is it moves the cropping up. And it has basic facial recognition. And so it will find hotspots that are people's faces, and it will recrop that image so that you're not cutting off people's faces. I think there are several different plugins that do that, but this one is my favorite. Ajax Thumbnail Rebuild is super useful when you start adding custom image sizes or you start changing your image optimization or your JPEG quality settings, and all of a sudden you need to redo all of the images that you've already uploaded. Just do Ajax Thumbnail Rebuild. It has some nice options. You can only tell it to only rebuild the featured images if that's something that you need, or you can have it do all of them. For optimizing images, I really like Resmushit, which uses the external API on the Resmushit website and runs all of your newly uploaded images through that and brings back the optimized PNG, GIF file, whatever you're using. It's a little slow, and so I do have to warn my users about that when they're when talking to new editors in WordPress and say, hey, as you upload these images, it's going to take a minute to kind of turn through this because we're trying to make it faster for the end users. And usually they're okay with that. Unattach and reattach media attachments does exactly what you think it does. If you've worked a lot with the media library, you know that each post or each file that was uploaded to a specific post is attached to that post. That post is its parent. And unattach and reattach will let you remove it from one post and attach it to a different one. So if you need to make something for some reason attached to a different page, you can do that. Before I move on, did anybody have any questions about image and media that I didn't cover? Yes.
I really like my eyes are up here. Also, although it's definitely an accessibility issue, if you ever have to upload logos or flyers or things like that that are text-based,
yes,
that you really need to make sure a specific part of it shows. You can use it manually. It isn't just facial recognition.
That's right. It does have a manual hotspot feature, and so you can make sure that your words aren't getting cropped in addition to faces.
Obviously, also put in alt text.
And yes, put in alt text.
That was kind of my question. Are these good for like accessibility?
I have a different set for accessibility. We'll move on. Anybody managing a big network? No? Couple? Okay. So there's a few that make network management a little easier. The first one that I start with is Blog Copier. When I spun up a network of sites where faculty were going to be able to sign up and get a site for their individual program. We created a template, enabled all the plugins that we wanted, set the settings the way that we wanted it, got the theme all configured, and then made that our site number 1 in the network, and then use Blog Copier to copy that rather than have their WordPress install. So each new site on that network has some basic settings filled in already. 10up has a new migration plugin that's really great when you need to extract a site from one multi-site network and put it into another. Database-wise, that's complicated, and you can't just do it by exporting your database and importing it. There's some tables that have to change. This is a plugin for WPCLI, which is the command line interface for WordPress. So if you don't have command line access to your WordPress installation for some reason, you're not going to want to use that one. You're going to want DB Migrate Pro by Delicious Brains, which is a graphical user interface for the same function. There's one called Multi-Site User Management. This helps when you have people signing up and you have things like people who haven't confirmed their email address. Oh, that's unconfirmed. I'm sorry. That's what unconfirmed does. Multi-site user management does other things. Which I've forgotten off the top of my head. Plugin activation status is fantastic. This is one written by Curtis Grimala, who isn't talking, I don't think, this week, but he's here. He does a really cool multi-network setup at William & Mary. And he wrote this plugin so that he could evaluate on all of those sites in his network who's using what plugin. There's a really great way to find out, are there any plugins that we installed thinking that a lot of people would use it and they're not using it, and we can remove it and not have to keep updating that. Simple multi-site sitemaps creates those just sitemaps.xml files, the Google, Yahoo combined sitemaps format. On multi-site, that's tricky because you can't use the regular multi-site, you can't use the regular sitemaps plugins. So this one is a really simple one that just does exactly what you think it should and creates a sitemap that's good for the whole network. I just put in Cavalcade because somebody was talking about it. It is a replacement for the WordPress cron system, which isn't a true cron. It doesn't always run when you think it should. So you schedule something to run every hour. It only runs every hour if someone has visited the WordPress site and has kicked off that process. So Cavalcade is a replacement for it that runs when you say it should run. Authentication on large networks is fun and on college campuses. There's a couple for Active Directory integration. And this is the one that has been recommended to me. I have to say that because I am not the person who configures Active Directory plugins on my clients' installations. I don't have access to their Active Directories. And so it's always somebody in the local team who's doing that. But this one seems to be reasonably easy to configure. MAESTRO is the one that we use most often on CAS systems. There's an older one called WPCampus that is no longer updated as far as I know, and also didn't work with our campus implementation of CAS. And so we had a fork of it for a while, and then we moved to this one, and MAESTRO works a whole lot better. There is a Duo plugin if you are requiring two-factor authentication. And you don't have something like CAS that's already doing that for you, you can install the Duo plugin. And we've had issues with using CAS or Active Directory usernames with the username restrictions being different on the network versus WordPress. WordPress has some weird username restrictions that are kind of a holdover from old versions of multi-user, which is now multi-site and is now built into WordPress. But it has some strange restrictions on usernames that may not match your networks. And so network username restrictions override lets you match that up a little bit better so that people don't get their usernames rejected when you're trying to create accounts for them in WordPress using an existing username from some other system. The CAS setup has a few other issues that I feel like you should know about before you jump into it. When this payload issue may depend on your campus. Ours does not include any information about the role. We send a username and a password, and we get back yes or no. That's it. And so we can't do some cool things with automatically provisioning a user account and giving them access to certain things, and maybe in a network setup, creating a site for them based on their role. So a student would get a student site, a faculty would get a faculty site. We can't do that because we're not getting that information out of CAS. The CAS plugin has a way to use a local WordPress account rather than CAS, and I hesitate to call it a backdoor because that makes people freak out about security. It's there, it's a feature, it's not anything that is visible, so you have to tell people if for some reason you need to use a local account rather than creating them a temporary CAS account, you have to give them a special URL. And the last time I tried it, CAS does not work with the mobile WordPress app. So if you're using like the iOS WordPress app to edit things, you won't be able to do it if you've enabled CAS logins because you can't log in. I think that they're working on that, but the bright side to that is that the WordPress admin screens have become themselves much more user-friendly on mobile phones, and so you don't necessarily need to use the mobile app as frequently anymore as you used to. Does that make sense? Okay. And that actually applies to any other app that relies on the sort of older XML RPC authentication. And like I said when I was talking about the network username override plugin, the WordPress usernames have to match CAS in order for this to work. And so you'll need that plugin so that you can make sure that they match. This is the interface for the username restriction override plugin, and it just lets you say, hey, we're going to allow hyphens and underscores and periods in our username and maybe uppercase letters because WordPress doesn't natively. And you can set a different minimum length, all those things that WordPress doesn't normally let you do. This is a plugin that was introduced at WPCampus in 2016. Site Setup Wizard. It's really cool, and I wish that I could use it because it provisions new sites on a network based on the user role. So you can have faculty set up and get a faculty themed site with maybe features that are specific to things that faculty would want to do versus students signing up on your network who need a totally different theme and set of features. This is a really cool plugin that lets you do that and lets you configure those different types of sites that users are going to get. And it's not compatible with CAS because we don't get any role information. Hopefully, all of this stuff will move to the REST API and we can start using this. Some things that I have found useful when working with the REST API, the advanced custom fields to REST API plugin lets you make all those new fields that you have created in advanced custom fields available in your API. Disable REST API doesn't disable the whole thing. It disables API access for people who are not logged in. So if for some reason you need to make your API available only to login users, this is a great plugin to do that. And then Distributor is very new, and I think you probably got some cards about it in your swag bag. It's a very new plugin from 10up that lets you push and pull posts from one site into multiple other sites, and it can be a multi-site network, or it can be some other URL, as long as Distributor is installed on both ends. It will check to see if the person who's logged in has permission to edit that custom post type or whatever post type that you're trying to edit. And it has a little admin bar interface for pushing your current post out to all of the other sites that are authenticated. Or if you're on the endpoint site, you can go and say, I want to pull this content from the site into the current one, and it will keep it synced. It's really nifty. Security plugins. These are the kind of big players. iThemes Security used to be known as Better WP Security. iThemes bought it and has been doing some good things with keeping it up to date. It is a very complex toolkit for configuring absolutely everything that you could ever want to configure involving security. It's not a simple plugin. WordFence is kind of a competitor slash slightly different feature set. WordFence is primarily known for its really great firewall, I think. And Securi is named after the security consulting firm of the same name. And they do a really nice job with post-hack cleanup. And so if your site has been defaced for some reason, you can install this security plugin and it will go through and it will tell you, these are the files that have been, that don't match, you know, the WordPress.org download. We're going to alert you every time somebody's logging in, sometimes every time somebody changes a plugin or installs a theme, and you can configure all kinds of notifications and stop certain things from happening.
Make sure you turn off the post notification, otherwise you will die. Your email people will hate you because every time a post is updated on any site, on a multi-site, you will get an email about it.
Yes, if you're using security on multi-site, the first thing you should do is visit the email notifications tab and turn a bunch of things off, because by default, it emails you every time someone posts something, every time they edit a post, pretty much anytime they breathe near the WordPress installation.
I hate mail from IT when I was on vacation and I got back and I had like 10,000 emails or something, the same number.
Yeah, your emails network managers are not going to be happy when they start seeing a million things come through from security. So turn some of that off. But otherwise, it's a fantastic plugin. For accessibility, these are the three that I like to install. I call it Totally. They might pronounce it Todali. I'm not sure. It's a great little visual tool for figuring out things like, do the images on this page have alt tags or alt attributes? Is the color contrast on this section sufficient? And it just gives you a little visual flag on each section of your website. There's a WordPress plugin that makes this a little easier to use. It's a tool that's available for like browser plugins and things like that, but the WordPress plugin is really simple to use. WP accessibility is kind of a group effort by the accessibility team to make certain things more accessible out of the box in WordPress that haven't quite gotten fixed in core yet. And the middle one there is maintained by Rachel, who runs our lovely event, and it includes some of these other tools. So it just kind of packages everything up into a nice little bundle so that you don't have to install 5 different things, and gives them to you. Search plugins are always one of the first things that you want to fix when you install WordPress, because we all know that the built-in WordPress search is terrible. My favorite is Relevancy, which is maintained by an Italian guy. That's why it's spelled the way it is. The premium version is fantastic, and as of the last several months, now we'll do PDF and Office documents that are uploaded to WordPress, which used to be a limitation. It didn't include that. Search WP is also a good plugin. Those are great if you have either a single WordPress installation or a network installation, and you're trying to search only things that are part of WordPress. If you, for some reason, have a lot of different subdomains, you have some stuff that's outside of WordPress, you're going to need probably Google CSE. You could probably also work with SwiftType or ElasticPress. Both of those are third-party services that have WordPress integration plugins. And ElasticPress is kind of the favorite of very, very large installations. Events calendars. The most popular is the events calendar by Modern Tribe. The problem with its name is that it's hard to Google, so put that in quote marks or just add Modern Tribe to your search query. This probably second most favorite is Event Espresso. Both of those have really great feature sets. They've been around for a while. Timetable is a plugin that is specifically for creating conference schedules, just like our conference schedule page for this event. And CampTix is one that is used by WordCamps to sell tickets. It's a very simple ticketing plugin. And then there's a couple of other ones here that are third-party services that, again, have these WordPress integrations. And those are great for scheduling resources like conference rooms and making appointments.
Recommendation for one that syncs with Google Calendar?
Recommendation for one that syncs with Google Calendar. The events calendar should do it. And I believe Espresso does. I haven't looked at that one in a while because we've been using the events calendar for most of our stuff.
Another one that's called Simple Calendar. It'll pull from Google Calendar.
Simple Calendar will pull from Google Calendar?
We've had some, and it'll just replicate it and pull it over to your
Okay.
site.
I tried Simple Calendar.
Simple Calendar didn't.
With it over time after some updates, like WordPress updates.
I've had a couple.
Yeah.
They do a lot of updates, and so it's a little finicky to keep up with.
There's also one called.
Some of that's been on Google's side. Google made a bunch of updates on theirs and things.
Agreed.
So these aren't working super well with Google integration for those on the live stream. Yes.
I had a question about if any of these plugins do the room scheduling and the events management in one that you've seen.
Yeah. So room scheduling and events is kind of a tall order, but that's okay. The events calendar does have premium add-ons, and one of them does tickets, and I believe can be used for free, like resource scheduling as well.
Okay, and then I had another question a moment ago. I don't think you saw my hand up.
Sorry.
So it's fine. So I had a question about a search.
Yeah.
Were there, so you mentioned, was it only Google was the only one that'll work across multi-sites?
I believe that SwiftType and ElasticPress will work across subdomains as well as Google CSE, but double check me on that.
Yes.
Go investigate those.
SwiftType
will.
will.
I believe ElasticPress will as well.
Great. I was literally looking this up the other day.
Yeah, they can. I know both of them do. SwiftType, you basically point the domains and everything that you want to.
SwiftType, you get to whitelist your subdomains.
It's a lot more granular. Yeah.
Okay, great. The events calendar has a lot of different views. The sort of month view is one of them, but you can also just do text for upcoming events. It's got a really nice search bar across the top where you can filter down. You want to find by keyword, by date, or by category. The individual event view has a lot of custom information down at the bottom. And the ability to put in things like organizer contact information and a map and, categories of events is one of the things that I really like about this plugin. Here's what timetable looks like. That's the conference scheduler. This group uses a lot for things like gym classes. This is the options interface for camp ticks. Like I said, it's super simple. It gives you a price. The price can be 0. It gives you the number of those that are available. And then you can schedule availability. So if you're not ready to sell tickets yet and tickets are only going to be available starting August 1st, you can put in a start and end date on that. And Camp Ticks also comes with some questions. So if you want to ask some people some sort of registration question, in addition to just getting their ticket, you can ask, you can add some questions to it. So this one is an example of drop down. Which workshop would you like? You can ask, do you have any dietary requirements? Things like that. Form builders, moving right along. Gravity Forms, like I said, is probably the most popular in the higher ed space. You need WCAG fields as a second plugin in order to make that a bit more accessible. There are some competitors. Gravity Forms is a little heavy on the download size on the front end. I found that Ninja Forms is a bit lightweight compared to Gravity. It's also a plugin that has a free set and then premium features. And it's a bit newer. And let me see if I've got it. Yeah, it doesn't look quite like WordPress. It gives you a very different feel when you go in to edit an individual form. It kind of whites out the entire WordPress interface and gives you just this field editor view, which is a little bit different from some of the other form plugins. Like, for example, Gravity Forms looks more like this, which is a much more familiar interface. I find that when you have something like Ninja Forms that kind of overwhelms the WordPress administration screen, sometimes users who are not super experienced with content editing feel like they've made a mistake and they've gone somewhere else that they didn't intend to go. So I particularly like the form plugins that keep you kind of looking in the same sort of WordPress look and feel. That's another advantage of Gravity Forms. Whoops. There are a couple of newer players in the game. Formidable is one of them, and WPForms.com. I would take a look at both of those if you don't already have a large institutional investment in Gravity Forms, as many of us do. Email notifications is another problem in WordPress. WordPress sends you some notifications, not a lot. And one of the things that drives me crazy is that the contributor process of submitting to an editor doesn't kick off a notification email that the editor needs to come review something. There's one called Peter's Collaboration Emails that fills in that need. It's a very simple plugin. That's all it does. Contributor submits, editors and administrators get a notification that they need to come and approve it. There's a much more complicated plugin called Better Notifications for WordPress that lets you configure other types of notifications that you want to happen when certain events are triggered. And then I dumped in here WP SMTP. If you are on a server that for some reason doesn't have native email capability, like Pantheon, for example, you might need this SMTP plugin so that you can send mail via some other server. It could be your campus server, it could be Gmail, something like that. And there are also plugins for third-party email services like SendGrid that will fill in that same need. This is the screen for Better Notifications. It has this drop-down list of actions that can possibly trigger a notification. And it says, okay, where do you want to send it? What's the subject going to look like? And then you can add some information to it. Permissions. This is a fun one. There's one called Members that's been around for a long time. Again, it's kind of hard to search for that because it's a generic word. It's written by a guy named Justin Tadlock. So that's one to take a look at. It's pretty simple. I like its interface quite a bit. There is a slightly more complicated one called Advanced Access Manager that's quite popular. Boston University has a really great suite of WordPress plugins that they have made available to the WordPress community, open source for free. One of them is called BU Access Control. And it's another one of those sort of permissions, fine-grained management of what people can do and what people can't do. Along with that, they have released one called BU Section Editing that lets you lock down users to certain specific categories or subsets of pages so that you don't have to make everybody an editor who has access to everything. You can give them access to a specific piece of your content. Workflow, if you need something a little more complicated than just a few email notifications here and there are a few options. There used to be one called Edit Flow. It's no longer being maintained and has kind of been forked and renamed into Publish Press. It has a lot of approvals, editorial calendar features, that kind of thing. So it's not just about notifications. It's a lot of planning, kind of routing. There is one called Oasis Workflow that I haven't personally had a chance to check out, but it's getting a lot of great reviews. And then Gravity Forms has released an add-on to their system called Gravity Flow. So if you're already using Gravity Forms for your forms, it might be worth looking into Gravity Flow for your workflow. Revisions. Again, this is an area where we have a few popular ones that have kind of dropped off in terms of maintenance and being current. Revisionary and Revisionize are the ones that I think most of us were using. Anybody got a newer replacement for those other than Boston University's versions plugin? Nope. So those are the popular ones still, even though they're a bit long in the tooth. This is what BU Versions looks like. It just gives you an option to create a clone. So create a new version without touching the old one that's been published, or to edit this version. Fantastic when you need to create a revision of a page that the revision can't be published until some embargo date has been reached. You can make that work. Performance and optimization. If you are not hosting with a third-party service that takes care of this for you, like Pantheon or WP Engine or any of those, then you need to have some sort of caching in place. These are the most popular ones. You can also put in, WordPress does not natively smush all of your JavaScript and CSS files in your theme on the front end down into like one request. So you can add various plugins to do that. Fast Velocity Minify is pretty good. I put a couple of stars by it because you have to test all of your JavaScript related functionality after enabling this and make sure that it didn't break anything. I've had a couple of instances where it broke something. And so I had to either rewrite my script or not use Minify. And then Resmush it, I mentioned already, for optimizing images is pretty good. I'm going to rush through these last few. I've got some changes to the admin screens that I like to make to sort of simplify things for my content editors. And one of the things I also like to do when I'm creating some complicated advanced custom fields input screens, I like to put in a little bit of inline documentation. And so there's no real easy way to do that in WordPress by like editing the editing screen. But in ACF, you have these different field types, and one of them is message field. And you can just create a message field that has a little bit of text and drag that into the order of your input fields, and it will give you a few, like just a helpful label or a line of text that reminds them how to handle this. That's one of the things I really like to use advanced custom fields for. There's another one called admin columns that I use quite a bit. If I'm not writing a plugin that changes the columns of my edit list view, I like to use admin columns to remove some things that aren't terribly relevant. This example, we had a publications database, and the author column is, of course, the person who wrote it in WordPress. That was not relevant. For this particular application, it was almost always going to be the same user. What we needed was some information about the publisher of that publication and flagged whether or not it was related to this particular federal grant. And we were able to do all of that using custom fields and then using admin columns to adjust the edit screen so that she had the information that she really needed in that area. And lastly, the help and documentation. I mentioned WP Help as a plugin that I use almost all the time to put documentation inline to put a library of documents in WordPress right where they can see it. And it lets you move this admin menu option up and down and rename it if you want to. This gives you, it's not great when you get a really long list of documentation, but when you need like 10 or 12 things that remind people of your editorial guidelines or some sort of specific technical reminder, this is a great way to do it. For example, I put in how to do photo cropping with the add hotspots feature, and my eyes are up here. Whoops. The other one that I like to use is the commercial WP 101 tutorial plugin, and it looks the same as WP Help because it was actually written by the same guy. But this one brings in the WP101.com help videos and puts an interface for them right into the WordPress dashboard. I find that really, really helpful for new users who just need to remind themselves how to do things like upload an image in WordPress. So I maybe have done training, but then it's been 6 months and I've forgotten how to do it. This is really helpful. I've got a whole presentation on migrations, and so I'm going to skip through this and let you take a look at that elsewhere. The last one that I wanted to mention, because you're in this room and not in the one where the textbooks presentation is happening, there is a great tool for open education resources and textbook publishing called Pressbooks. And it gives you a way to author things in WordPress and then export them as ebooks or as a web book. And this is kind of what the web book looks like. You've got your table of contents that is a drop-down menu up there. And it's very formatted for readability. You've got at the very bottom your next and previous pages. Authoring it looks just like authoring a WordPress post or page. But the edit screen is very different. In fact, it takes out the normal edit screen and gives you this organize where you've got different content types for the front matter, which is like the copyright things at the beginning of your book, acknowledgments, stuff like that. And then the body of the book, you have each chapter. And you can create additional sections, which gives you different page breaks and things like that in the book. And then your back matter, which is like your afterword, your index, glossary, that kind of thing. If you need information on getting into WordPress from any other content management system or plain HTML file, CSV export, things like that, I have a whole nother presentation on how to do that. And if you need some code snippets related to some of those network management things that I talked about, I've got those in my presentation from High Ed Web 2 years ago. That was a workshop, and so I had that stuff private until earlier today. But now I'll put this slide up, and it's got a link, and you can go grab a few code snippets for additional management capabilities. And we're about out of time. Does anybody have any additional questions about plugins that I did not cover? This will be up on the WPCampus on the schedule entry for this session. I will get it to Rachel, and she'll probably have it up later today. Thank you, everyone.